Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 191 in the book of Genesis. Indelicate title today, When My Life Sucks, What Should I Do? So we're in the conclusion of a passage from Genesis chapter 50, where Joseph assesses the situation of betrayal from his brothers, and he says, as for you, you meant it for evil, you brothers meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So we're going to ask the question is, can it be that we stand under the sovereignty and rule and dominion of God, when that's God's in control, when it doesn't appear that God is on the throne? So can God be in control in the chaos of our experience? Can God be sovereign in the circumstances that I do not prefer? And can God actually be in dominion when it seems like the world is falling apart, and specifically my world is falling apart? So let's say yes, just for argument's sake, that throughout history, God is making his purposes and accomplishes his purposes on earth. And you may argue with the guys in Genesis and say, oh, well, they don't understand me. They don't have it as bad as I have it. Well, that may be true, but they had plenty of bad things. They had family betrayal, conspiracy, sexual peril, murderous intent, slavery of Joseph that didn't end even after, the happy story of his family reunion. So Joseph, he's the guy that ended up having to ask permission to go to Thanksgiving dinner with his family because he was, still a slave. He might have been needed that day. So knowing all along, God's rule does not read as smooth as, I might like it from where I sit. So here's what I see. I see in the world today, suffering and sickness, immorality, evil, violence, strife between people, misgovernment, abuse of powers. I see that in my world, and if I'm careful, I see it in myself. Yet, Genesis teaches that amidst evil, even with specifically intended evil, which is how they describe it in Genesis chapter 50, intended evil, but God is still at work. Aslan is on the move, as we said earlier. So back to our question is, when my life sucks, what shall I do? So I would recommend three things. Number one, look for sin, because that's where you're going to see the merciful hand of correction. So unbelievers, if you're feeling, this tug to the Lord, this is a way that God can use you to bring you to himself. So perhaps it will blow your mind, unbeliever yet person, that God desires to be in a relationship with you. Yes, sinful you. Go and sit on that for a while and eventually turn your heart and worship him. Well, how about believers? Can believers sin? Absolutely. And if so, the discipline of sin is like a father correcting his child. That's one thing he can use to bring you back into relationship with himself. So that's number one, look for sin. Secondly is look for sovereignty. Look for God at work. Let's be a little more active in this activity of seeing God. Now, granted, it's often secret and often hidden, but if you do not specifically see the sovereignty and you cannot fathom it, you can't get your arms around it, and despite looking as hard as you can, you cannot see how God is at work here, then I would say number three. And that means moving us in a geographically spiritual different posture, which is to change your mindset. This is the third thing. From confusion and misunderstanding and bewilderment to entrusting. That's number three, is entrusting God through the suffering, through the injustice. Now we'll learn from another passage in the New Testament in 1 Peter chapter 2 is that we can please God during this time of injustice. And this can be a gracious thing in the eyes of God. And Christ has given us an example of how to do this exact hard thing. So we are called mentally and willfully to walk in the steps of Jesus. So we're called to watch our mouths, watch our actions, and move to this new geographical place, which is an entrustment place. So this is from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 20. For what credit is it if when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it, you endure, this is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For this you have been called, because Christ has suffered for you, leaving you an example that you might follow in his steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. So wait, you mean to tell me that in the context of suffering, injustice, pain, relational brokenness, God is still there as one who just judges justly? He's still on the throne. One of the powers to endure circumstances you do not prefer is to remember the God that you do prefer and remember him rightly. So one of the callings here is that we trust the justly judging God when it does not appear that he is currently exercising justice. So our standards in our behavior are very high. We're supposed to be doing what Jesus did, and we're to follow his example. Be sinless in suffering. Don't revile. Don't lash out, but trust and continue in trusting. So make this our whole life, one of trusting and continuing in trusting during what appears to be some bad stuff. So when my life sucks and the circumstances are bad, entrust who? The one who still has it all under control, the one who still judges justly. So similarly to Joseph, and what has been called the theological high point of his life, let's make this one thing a high point in our lives. Let's borrow his theological high point for us. And the truth is that Joseph learns that it is crucial to our walking on the earth, that when bad things happen, you sold me, to know the sovereignty of God, that God sent me, and entrust in that gap, if you will. God is sovereign in the slop, and it's not going to easily look like it. So God can be on purpose during and within what we see as evil or injustice. Thanks for listening.